Welcome to the Keeping Friendship Magic podcast, the podcast that combines social science with pop culture and fandom to build a better tomorrow. I'm your host, Forward Progress. Joined with me, as always, is the lovely and talented Nova Rose.
Hello.
And our special guest this week, Lyrical Lace Cosplay.
Howdy.
Today we're going to be focusing on the topic of the culture of cosplay. So today, I want to start off with a very simple question to the group about cosplay in general, and what does cosplay mean to you? And anybody can feel free to start with that topic.
I'd say just expressing yourself through your most favorite characters or franchises.
Okay.
I see it as a way of showing off my artistic skills and expressing my love for certain characters, games, movies, cartoons, anime.
Indeed. I know for me, granted, I'm no cosplay expert. I don't have the skills that either of you two have. However, I have manufactured together some cosplays with some terrible home stitching. However, it doesn't look bad, though.
Did you ever finish that tank?
Kind of.
Oh boy.
Tank is in the tortoise, everyone. Tank is in the tortoise. But cosplay for me is first and foremost a lot of fun for me. I very much enjoy getting to put on something, and there's one thing that I think gives me joy, and you guys as cosplayers can chip in too, is there's nothing I love more than somebody stopping me in a cosplay to compliment me and ask to take my picture.
I think it's only happened to me like twice, maybe.
I do agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, there's something about that, like, it's kind of I almost want to say it's a sense of validation for the work you put into the cosplay and for, just being recognized in general. And that's kind of something at the core of what we all want as human beings, is to have some sense of recognition and validation. Everybody has that to a certain extent. It's only natural, because it kind of gives you that sense of, I belong here. So, that being said, there's obviously a lot of positives in cosplay. There's also been instances of negative experiences with cosplay and throughout cosplay culture. So we're going to try to tackle a couple of those different issues today. One thing I guess we'll start with is if either of you have ever had a very negative experience that was linked to a cosplay you were wearing, and that is if you're okay with sharing it, and and kind of just what your thoughts on the downsides of what can happen when you're in cosplay.
Well, I do have one at most recent. At one of the UI minicons, I was dressed as a more casual 2B from Nier Automata. And, I had people that were interested, and then as soon as they actually talked to me, they're like, oh, you're a guy. Yeah. And that's...
Which you're not.
I'm not. I'm transgender. I was male to female. I just still have a deep voice because that's not easy to get rid of.
Well, and that's a thing. Regardless of what your gender is compared to your sex, there's people who are cis female who have very deep voices. In general, one of the greatest women I ever saw on television was Bea Arthur, who always had a very deep voice and a very commanding presence. So
yeah.
There's nothing saying that just because you have a deeper voice doesn't mean you should be looked at as the gender you associate with. And I think that that's something as a culture that maybe we need to adapt to in general. So you bring up an interesting point, though, about crossplay.
Yes.
And let's put it in these terms: is there is crossplay and there is gender swap cosplay. And I've noticed kind of a sense of people are very quick to delineate which they're doing, in a sense. do you as cosplayers feel that there is a need to put that out there when you are doing one or such thing, or it's just a matter of I'm just in a cosplay?
It really just depends on the way you do it for me. Like I have some people that, some female friends that like to cosplay male characters, but like the male character is like a very specific look and everything, and so they do their gender bent cosplay, which is a similar but far more feminine version of that character.
Mm-hmm. I know for myself there's a cosplays I've been meaning to do, and part of it I think fits into how comfortable I am with my body. I have worn skirts as part of my cosplay, even though I am cis male, and I don't care. I'm happy with that. I'm definitely with it. But there's some cosplays that I feel like I would work better with my body type doing different takes on it. We've discussed in the past doing Kill la Kill cosplays as a group, and I've always jumped up and said I want to be Satsuki, but I feel like I wouldn't necessarily do the standard Junketsu cosplay. I would want to switch it up, maybe make something a little more tailored to my body type, which I guess you would call a gender bent cosplay. But at the same token, in my head, I don't feel like it has to be called a gender bent cosplay.
In that case, I think it's just more of a personal variant.
Yeah, it's.
See, it's the rough thing for me is, like, I always like to go be as faithful to source material as possible. Same. So, but then it's just, like, a lot of it doesn't really work well with my body type, which sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and then there's also characters like, we like to go to pony conventions, and they have no real set look. That there, you can go wild with how you want to represent that character.
I've done a very casual Rainbow Dash cosplay in the past that is similar to Rainbow Dash from Equestria Girls, very similar, and it's kind of one of those where I've never really thought about the gender of it at all. Yeah. It just is, and it looks a lot like Equestria Girls, which is where that, you know, you could take it within the realm of My Little Pony and look at Equestria Girls as the human equivalent. But the one thing, and I think it's something I really respect and love about this fandom, is just because there is a human variant that's been played out there that is canon, it's not the end-all be-all for this is what your cosplay needs to look like.
Exactly.
And there's so many different variations and takes on it. Since we're on this topic, I want to ask everybody if you've ever had an instance where you've done a unique take on a cosplay and had a negative reaction to your version of that character.
I don't think I have.
No, I can't say I have.
Okay. I noticed it myself, but at the same token, I've looked at different things and I've heard different things just through the grapevine from people, and there are times where people are really anal about being faithful to what is. And that's, you know, at what point does it go from artistic license to having to be faithful?
See, one thing I find interesting, at least with the pony community, is that, like, I feel like you don't really get any flack for doing your own take on things. If anything, people just kind of ignore you.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's like other things, because like I know that Steven Universe one with the thinner person doing rose quartz. That was a thing.
Well, let's dive into that.
I don't know about that one.
Yeah, so I've seen people, and these are not generalizations, these are just things that have happened, and it could be definitely on the minority side. But you can control your body type, but only to an extent. Everybody's physiology and anatomy is unique, and somebody could work out all day until the cows come home and still have a bigger build, and other people could eat non-stop, load up on carbs and calories, and still be thin as a board.
Yeah, I can vouch for that, because I mean, I still have my gut, and you know, I work out crazy twice a week, and
Hun, I can
Yeah,
barely. I
and I
can't
barely
even see
eat
a
it.
gut on you. Don't. No. For the audio listeners, Lyrica just tried to show us her tummy. We'll be right back after these messages. No. But there's a beauty in Steven Universe that the characters on the series are all different body types, and the series I've always felt is very positive, has a very strong sense of body positivity. And Rose Quartz, as a character at hand in this discussion, is a character that has we'll call it a more full figure.
Yeah.
And there's been those who don't have that full figure but love the character and want to cosplay it, and there have been others who say, is that demeaning to the character? Personally, I don't feel it is, in a sense of, if you want to pay tribute to a character, it's not like, I think what would, in my opinion anyway, I think what might be disrespectful is if you try to overdo it in the sense, in a sake of like, okay, well, just because the character has a fuller figure, now I have to make it be that, even though it's not even working with my body. Does that make sense? If that makes sense.
I mean, if you go to the extreme, yeah, but there is ways to do it where it's still not negative, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. Okay. Yeah, you're 100% right on that. I think maybe the point at hand is there any reason that a person with a slimmer build couldn't do a Rose Quartz cosplay in their own body build?
I don't see why not. As
It-
long as you're faithful enough to the character.
And that's another thing too, because it kind of goes into what we were just talking about the difference in taking artistic license and artistic representation, where you're doing a variation on that character. So, if your body type does not match the character you do, do you ever feel a responsibility to make yourself more like that type? And it can be in multiple ways. It can be in gender. It can be in body size. It could be in a character of a different race, say, even. And we'll dive into that a little more in a minute. But if you've been putting together a cosplay, has that ever crossed your mind of, I want to do this character, but ...
My old thing is, I wish I had bigger breasts.
Actually, to an extent, yeah. Because, like, there's a character from the newest Pokemon game I would really want to cosplay. But at the same time, I feel like I really shouldn't, because skin type.
Okay.
There's a whole big can of worms right there.
Nessa?
Yes, Nessa.
Okay. Let's dive into this. I had a good friend of all of ours, actually, a couple years ago, who wanted to pick my brain about a topic, and he was, in a very respectful manner, is basically in terms of, if you are not African American, but you want to cosplay a character that is African American, where do you draw that line where it turns into blackface? And I had to take a step back and really think about that. And I'll share in a minute what I had to say about it. But knowing that is a thing that crosses your minds, if you're going to cosplay a character of a different race, what are your thoughts on doing that cosplay?
Obviously do nothing to change my skin. No body paint or anything, because honestly, I find it disrespectful. But I mean, still wear the outfit or whatever. I mean, if it's enough for people to be able to tell what character you're cosplaying, because I mean, you're doing it in a more appropriate way that way, I think.
I want her hair. It's amazing.
But have you ever run into that for you, Rose?
It's funny because I think I wanted to go cosplay the same character, and that was kind of the same thing of like, should I? I don't know. So
what I had said to this person was very similar to what you guys were talking about, in a sense of, while I understand the intent of an individual to want to celebrate the character and get as close to their reality as possible of this is what the character 100% looks like, you have to look at our social location. What I mean by that is you have to look at where we are in terms of what is happening around you in the world and in history. And let's face it, in America, blackface has been used for some very, very negative things. And regardless of the fact, like, it's 2020, and we are still combating racism. We are still combating years upon years, hundreds of years of just denigration and degradation of people based on race and characteristics that really shouldn't, matter as to how we treat another human being. So it's a matter of, I think, if you put forth the effort to respect the character, you do it, but there's a line you do not cross. I feel that you can make a cosplay and not have to change your race to do that cosplay. And a key example of where I go with this is anime cosplays. Mm-hmm. Because it's not something that necessarily gets discussed with anime cosplays that much.
But really and truly, all the characters are Asian.
Most. It depends on where it's set, because there are some that are set in Britain or fantasy worlds and whatnot.
Well, that and like one of the older animes of the early 2000s, Azumango Daioh, one of the characters was an American.
Mm-hmm. Actually, there was a yaoi I watched for research where some of the main characters were Canadian.
Hey.
So it's an interesting thing when you take a look at it, is just, if you're okay with it in one regard, why are we not okay with it in this other regard, so to speak? If you're okay not trying to change your race for that, what says you can't be okay with it alternatively?
Exactly.
So, and obviously, I recognize my position as, as a Caucasian cis male, that I will never be able to fully understand truly the extent of what it means to be a different race than this, to be a different gender than this, in this society that we live in. But I can still respect people as a human being and do that through how I cosplay.
Does that mean you're a human being?
Are we human or are we dancers?
No, we're beings.
Oh, we're beans?
I'm a human being.
Okay, what kind of bean, though?
I mean, what's up?
Oh, hi, Lyrical Lace. How are you?
Hi.
So we'll move on here a little bit. Let's talk about some successes we've had from cosplay and experiences where you've been really proud of something you've created and what it's done for you. If anybody wants to talk on the matter.
Actually, my most recent cosplay at BronyCon this past year. Rest in peace.
Press F.
Press F. I made a full armored Fire Emblem inspired Princess Cadence.
Mm-hmm.
And it was my most complex cosplay to date. And I just loved how it turned out. I was happy with all of it, and people loved it. People got lots of pictures, and I got pictures with some really cool people too.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just great overall.
How about you, Rose? Any examples you have of something where it's been a really positive experience or...
Honestly, I think our Tweak and Craig one was
was good.
Was one of the better ones, and it's like one of the few times I've actually been asked to take a picture.
If we can, I'll try to get some cosplay photos edited into the YouTube version of this, or maybe some links here. But Nova Rose and I at Tekko and ZenkaiCon, I think we did it at both of them, did a Tweak and Craig, and we, at the one convention, we literally had somebody run up to us from down the hall just to tell us how much she loved Twig and Craig and appreciated our cosplay. And it's ironic because it was one of the simplest cosplays to put together, too. There was very little construction involved in that one. And
a trip to the thrift store and me dyeing hair. That was essentially it.
But I think this leads us into another interesting topic that I feel is an ever-going debate within cosplay communities, and that is...
How toxic it is?
Well, we'll get to toxicity in a moment, but this, I think, might lend into that discussion of where... I guess the easiest way to put this question is the homemade cosplay versus the store-bought cosplay. And there's a sense of, I know both of you have sewing skills, have skills in putting this together, you've worked on honing it, and you deserve a lot of respect for what you have done. Mm-hmm. However, some of us, i.e. me, don't have that much, and for some of the cosplays we want to do are I recognize one that I've really wanted to do is Shinon from Sword Art Online, and I take one look at it and go, that is way too complex for me to figure out on my own, and I know I can buy versions of it, and I've debated that with myself of, if I buy this, is it cheapen it in any way?
Personally, no. Cosplay is about how you enjoy it. Who cares about how other people expect it or like it? I mean, like you said, I have all the skills and everything. I buy cosplays. Mm-hmm. Most of mine are through my cosplays, but I mean, my Tharja, one of my favorite cosplays I've worn was from my costumes. My Princess Peach also.
I think just in my personal experiences, I like to make my cosplays just because it's just it's something that I can create and essentially.
And sometimes you just don't have the time or the resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of where I'm going now, because there's a couple I want to go do. I just don't have time.
Yeah, and that's, there are people who have made a living in the cosplay community, but that's
few and far in between.
It really is. If you compare the amount of people who are turning it into a business and a life to the amount of people who do it overall, it's the ratio is way off. Mm-hmm. And for those of us, I'll take, I can speak to my own experiences, so I will. If I work 40 hours or more a week, I am, I present at multiple conventions throughout the year. Right. I work my butt off of trying to make the panels for it, collaborating with people, making this podcast happen. There's so much that I already have on my plate that cosplay, a lot of times, while I want to do it, I don't have a lot of time to focus on putting it together.
Yeah, that's play second or third fiddle, basically.
Yeah. And granted, that's probably, and that's probably where it belongs in my life, too. I need to focus on making a living. I need to focus on the projects that I'm most passionate about here. And bringing things like the podcast, like panels and such, means a lot to me. So, of course, I'm going to want to put my focus into that. So, there's a sense of respecting where it fits into your life and not having to feel shame because you can't do what somebody else who has more time or has the ability to focus or has more natural talent.
Well, I mean, some of these people, that is their day job. Mm-hmm. They make their cosplays and go to conventions, and that's what they do for a living. Mm-hmm. And more power to them. I wish I could be there, but, we all have life. Mm-hmm. Not everyone has the same options available to them.
And I think that there's something to be said about the fact that some people might only attend 1 or 2 conventions a year. Yep. So they will take most of the year working on 1 or 2 outfits.
Yep.
And they put more time in it.
And sometimes they'll do commissions in between.
Yep. And then you have others. I, for example, I'm planning probably 5 or 6 conventions this year.
Yeah.
If I wanted to make different cosplays for all the conventions, it would never happen.
Yep.
So there's something to be said about respect for your fellow individual and the effort that they put into what they have. Because even if you have to buy it, it's still, you worked for that money.
Yep.
You put in that money. And you made a choice to do that, and you made sure. And even sometimes when you buy things, you still have to alter it and customize it.
Exactly.
Honestly, I think some of my favorite cosplays I've done is like 90% of it I found at a thrift store.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing I love about that is like some of your cosplay pieces you can just use in everyday life.
Well,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
But like you're saying, sometimes you have to alter it. My 2B cosplay that I wore for ZenkaiCon last year. The gloves were very long, so I had to trim them down and resize them. But the main bodysuit of the dress was too wide, so I had to take it in. So I mean, yeah, sometimes work still has to be done.
Yep.
You can take anything, and with sometimes even minimal effort, you can turn it into a great masterpiece, essentially.
Mm-hmm. I don't know personally, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I personally don't know, I think anybody, really, personally, that takes just plain fabric and makes the entire thing from head to toe.
That's what I wanted to go do.
I mean, that's what I do with my cadence.
Okay, well then I stand corrected. But
well, except for the toe. The toe, I just wore boots I had. I didn't make my own shoes, sadly.
But that's, and that's the thing, is not everybody can make everything.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of the thing, is diversity is what makes life great and makes it interesting and fun.
It's the spice of life.
It really is. And gosh, we're going to dip into cliches, aren't we? But
I am a cliche.
Huh?
I am a walking cliche.
You're more unique than you give yourself credit for, my dear. But
No, I'm just a salty.
But anyway, yeah. So going off on this, we've discussed kind of the idea there, but the thrift store cosplays are fantastic. I love them so much, and a good friend of mine that has talked about casual cosplay and cosplaying to make yourself, I want to say, like, cosplaying for just personal power and doing things that other people might not even recognize to make that happen, in a sense of, you might have like an article of clothing that represents that character, and you might even wear that day to day. And other people might not even realize in your head it's kind of cosplay and empowering.
Actually, that's kind of most of my BronyCon cosplays last year, with the exception of my cadence.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were just, swing dresses.
Mm-hmm.
And I love wearing swing dresses on a normal day-to-day basis, just not while it's winter out.
Mm-hmm. I have a pair of green pants that I bought specifically for conventions to wear for a Forward Progress look, to kind of have like a signature look that's based on my OC character, and I wore them to work the other day.
I was going to say, you wear them all the time.
Yeah, I love them. Honestly, they're some of the most comfortable pants I've ever bought. I think I should probably buy 2 or 3 so I have them ready.
Probably.
Yeah, but there's a power in cosplay, I think, that sometimes individuals forget about, and it becomes easy to judge.
Yeah.
And we forget about, what does the cosplay mean to them.
Yeah. And for some people, the big thing with cosplay is just the escape.
Mm-hmm.
You can escape your boring life, and you can be that character for a time.
Mm-hmm.
And at a convention, I mean, most people will see you as that character.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will take it a little too far and actually go... I don't know how to put this. Like they will see you as one character and then see somebody as another character, and they're like, oh, I want to ship these 2 characters together. You 2 kiss. I have seen that at a convention.
Now that is a thing.
That's going too far.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is going to take us down the path that we knew we were going to get to here eventually in
Lissai.
what protocol is with a cosplayer. And there's a lot of debate, I feel, about what people feel is they can or cannot do for somebody in cosplay. And there's a very popular statement or phrase out there that cosplay is not consent.
That is rule number one. Cosplay is not consent. Just because somebody's in cosplay doesn't mean that you can just take a picture willy-nilly. You can't, like, do things to them. You still have to ask them for anything you want to do. You can't take it upon yourself to do something just because they're in cosplay.
Yeah. There's, honestly, that kiss example is something I never even really heard of or thought about before, so that kind of, like, floored me.
Yeah.
I can see...
I actually saw it at Fan Expo Toronto.
Oh, goodness. I can see wanting it to be a reality, but trying to push it would be a thing of... I could even see suggesting it in a respectful manner, but not pushing it, or saying, I wish this could happen, could even be a thing. And then maybe that would be a way if I was somebody and I saw it be like, oh man, I wish we had such and such a character so you could kiss. You're just thinking out loud at that point almost, or just talking about it. And then if said person was into it, they could be like, oh yeah, and other people, and if not, they could be like, yeah, no, that's not my thing, and it's done.
Yeah.
I think one thing I know some conventions have done, BronyCon has done this, and there's other conventions that have, is the color-coded cards.
Yep.
To represent how comfortable you are with contact from others.
Usually they're based on the stoplight system. Green light means, go for it, come up to me, ask. Yellow is usually some variant of...
If I know you already.
Or I'm iffy. And red means don't bother me. Don't even come up to me or anything, please.
So, I think there's a question to be had of... Do we actually follow them? Have you noticed at conventions that use them, have people followed through with it?
Well, personally, I haven't been to as many cons as you tend to go to. So the only con I knew of that did it was BronyCon, and I almost always saw it respected at BronyCon.
Granted, I feel... For the most part, obviously there are exceptions, but for the most part at pony conventions, there is a little bit of a higher level of respect and spirit that I find there, that people are more akin to recognizing things like that. Actually, I know one, I believe at last year's BronyCon they added pronoun ribbons as well, which
BronyCon added the pronoun ribbon.
I really appreciated, and I wore mine. I know that, and because let's face it, that is a very awkward topic sometimes to bring up.
And I will say, the convention scene has been one of the more welcoming of the LGBT community and the more gender fluid, queer. Transgender groups, and especially
definitely
compared to most places.
Definitely. So, Rose, what has your experience been at conventions with the color-coded card system? Have you felt that it has been respected when it is used?
I mean, I've had nothing but positive experiences with it, in my opinion. But
yeah, it's something. It's definitely a conversation to have of, is this something that should be the norm?
Yeah.
Yes. I think that is a firm yes.
And then...
Especially in anime cons.
Oh boy.
Well, let's discuss that a little bit, is since cosplay is largely on the convention scene, what role do you feel convention staff has or needs to play in maintaining this sense of, the cosplay is not consent, protecting its people, its attendees within it. Like, at what point, like, how far does one need to go? How much is involved, and how much responsibility is on a convention itself?
I mean, personally, I feel all responsibility should be on the convention because, one, it's their event. For anything, any place hosting an event, they are responsible for everything and everyone that's there.
Mm-hmm.
In every way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when we have our games with Derby, Mac, the owner of the place, and the team, we're responsible for everything that happens there.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, if we have one person acting up, we're responsible for either getting them to calm down or get them out.
Mm-hmm. Would, if you had control of a convention or whatever, what would be your thoughts on policies to enact or program? What would you have as this is the rule regarding interaction with cosplayers?
See, I think if there's any kind of sexual harassment or anything,
it needs to be taken seriously.
It needs to be taken seriously. Like, I would just basically immediately take their badge and kick them out of the con.
Mm-hmm. Now, is that just at accusation, or is that a like at what point do they get kicked out? Is it a thing where as soon as somebody says something, you kick them out, or do you investigate?
Oh, there should always be investigation.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, innocent until proven guilty. I mean, that I still stand by that idea.
There's definitely a level of, you want a con, or you want any event that you go to. We keep talking about cons because that's where cosplay largely happens, but there's other spaces and events that people will be gathered in large groups, and you want to always protect the safety of everybody there and make everybody feel comfortable. But at the same token, you also have to respect everyone that's there. So you want it to be taken seriously, but in a sense of being respectful at the same time to all parties involved.
Yeah.
And I think that gets very hard sometimes because there's been instances where I know people have had negative experiences with other individuals, and it's definitely hard sometimes for those on the other side to make decisions on it. And I definitely have a lot of respect for those who come out and say, this is how we stand, and this is what won't be tolerated, and this is how we will follow through. And I think maybe that's where we're going with this, is a matter of having a policy in place and maintaining it and having accountability to that policy. Because when you sign up to attend a convention, you sign up to attend the convention with the rules that they have already established.
Yeah.
Now, as a kind of an addendum to this, is you were saying something about how, like, you should investigate. How do you investigate?
And see, that's where the problem lies. You really can't, because if you're at a convention, you are not the police. You don't have no control over the law. All you can control is your rules, and if there is any evidence of proof that somebody is breaking the rules that you have set in place, it is your responsibility to get that taken care of. And witnesses are a thing too.
And it's one of those things. It's definitely a difficult position to be in.
Yeah, that's why too.
I would never want to be thrust into that role.
Yeah.
Personally, but somebody does need to. And in like you bring up, you're not the police. You can only control what's within the borders of your event. Now, that being said, I'm pretty much positive that all conventions have the right to revoke somebody's badge and remove them at any point.
Yeah.
So...
And they specifically say that they can revoke it at any point.
Mm-hmm.
Most convention badges specifically actually say that.
Mm-hmm. And there are people that are just like to watch the world burn out there. We know this for a fact. And what creates an interesting thing, and we've seen this at some previous conventions where there have been individuals who have essentially threatened to attend a convention and harass people.
Yeah.
And I feel one of the things that gets interesting is, and this is a topic that I feel will get brought up a lot throughout the episodes that we do, is this idea that oftentimes vocal minorities destroy things for the majority. And this would be an instance where there might be one or two people who raise kind of a big hubbub about it. And to be honest, at its core, it should be a thing that is just dealt with swiftly and quietly. But because they become so vocal and involve so many other parties within it, that's where things get tough.
Yeah.
That's where you get, derision on the internet. You get people divided and arguing and fighting. And
it's a flame war at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So I think maybe, and you can give your opinions on this, but maybe one of the biggest things that we all have it within ourselves to take some responsibility of not feeding the fires of the flame.
Yeah. As a former moderator of many chat rooms back in the early 2000s, I can definitely agree with that. It's definitely our job to not fan the flames.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I do have to go ask is, I know we had that incident with BronyCon about how someone was threatening to harass the LGBT community. Like, people who do that, do they actually plan on attending the con, or are they just doing that to stir up?
More often than not, it's just stirring it up. But there are times where it has happened.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I've noticed this too, that personal fights, somebody might have a problem with a person, and then it turns into a larger thing.
Yep.
That maybe they had issues with one or two individuals, and then it gets talked up like it's about everybody.
Yep.
And
we all have experience with that.
Yep.
And we're not going to get into that.
Yeah, no, but it's but to talk about it in general terms, there's a level of, I feel that there's a level of conduct that should be expected in respect. And you cannot police necessarily what happens outside the walls of your convention. But if you know that somebody is doing that, because that's one of the things. If somebody's doing it online, it's not saying they don't have freedom of speech to say what they have. It's not even that at all. They can say and believe how they want to, and you can't stop them. But what you can do is create a safe space for your attendees and say, because then you have physical evidence. You have what's posted on social media and say, I'm sorry, we do reserve the right to not sell you a con badge.
Yeah, and most conventions do make use of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a thing, is I feel sometimes like we have this perception of toxicity and a broken community, when really it's just a couple of people, just bad apples who are stirring bad eggs, bad apples, bad
poops.
Sure, why the hell not? But
fiery poops.
Welcome to our highbrow podcast, everyone.
We're all a couple bad poops away from wanting to end the world.
As I sip from my Taco Bell cup. But suffice to say. Oh goodness. So, but suffice to say, a lot of times it's the vocal minority, and then we get this. It creates a divisiveness, and it creates a sense that the entire community is broken. So, speaking to that, I mean, let's talk about toxicity. Is there, like, is cosplay culture toxic? Or are there just some toxic people within the cosplay community?
I mean, again, it's a catch-22 with that, too. Because, like with anything, they're the vocal minority.
Mm-hmm.
Well, look, I'll never forget the one cosplayer did a Bowsette cosplay that was essentially just a bikini, and boy, did people bully her.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's fill me in. Fill me in on this. So bully in what manner?
That it was just like it was a lazy cosplay, and that like calling her like a slut and yada.
Slut shaming.
Yeah.
Slut shaming. Now that's a topic we can definitely get into here, because there are certainly standards for decency in any space.
I still don't understand.
Well, I get that there's a standard, but we've already had this conversation about body positivity, and one of these things, and this is an overall cultural fight we have over what is acceptable to show and what's not. This is ever going, nonstop. So this is something that goes beyond the realms of just cosplay or just conventions. It's a very deep-rooted issue in our society. And you have some people who are nudists. You have some people who are very much like, I cannot show anything, and feel it's, just...
And you have some that want to sell their bathwater.
Speaking of... But I feel that leans into this, is...
That was a perfect business opportunity, and she took it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a... Because then you ask the question of, who is the one who should feel shame in this instance? The one selling it, or the ones buying it?
Or the ones who did not think of it first.
I didn't even think about that, but there's a sense of everybody's got a body. Everybody's got a naked body underneath. So...
No, I have a reptilian body underneath, thank you very much.
That's what those scales were. So... But... At what point... What is acceptable and what's not? When it comes to a public space that is open to all age groups.
To go put it to most con books, whatever is covered by a swimsuit, which to me is the vaguest thing, because swimsuits are strange.
Some swimsuits literally cover nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, as long as the privates are covered, that's, I think, decent.
Well,
like, if it's not something that you would normally wear in public,
Well, cosplay in general is usually something you don't wear normally in public.
Well, I know,
Speak for yourself.
Like, two cosplays I always wanted to go do was Ryuko and Nono, I think was her name.
Nana?
Yeah.
Jakuzure?
Jakuzure, yeah.
Yep. Kill.
And with her third form, but I know, like, basically it's like almost nothing is covered with that, so...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, is that an acceptable cosplay? I have no idea.
I think the important thing is each convention does and should have a clearly defined standard, or any event really, a clearly defined standard of what will be acceptable. And even, there's certain things, there's certain conventions that are very much like, this is all, like we're the family-friendly convention and this is how we want to have ours. And others that will also divide it. You'll have 18 plus, 21 plus hours or sections or times.
Yeah.
So is that potentially the great compromise, is we have this policy in certain areas or at certain times, but after X, we free it up, or in X areas.
I mean, in that case, it's even more difficult because, like, if you have a more revealing cosplay,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not staying at the con hotel,
That's a very good point.
how are you going to get to that area?
Mm-hmm. Coat checks are great.
Yes.
Wear a trench coat. That is.
But not all.
I mean, that
conventions
is.
have them.
Speaking of cliches.
Not all conventions have coat checks.
And that's true. I know some that do. And then I know it's a struggle sometimes for myself because I always get a little paranoid about giving somebody else something that's mine to watch over.
I'm the same way.
And when you have to pay a fee for it too. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times at conventions, I am budgeting thin.
Yep.
Because I have so many to go to, and transportation and hotel costs. And anybody who's listening to this that attends conventions or events throughout the country knows the struggle.
Yep.
Is you have to plan, and sometimes that's not included in your plan.
I feel like you haven't truly experienced a con until you shove 6 people into a hotel room.
We are not encouraging this, by the way.
Are you saying 6 is the most you've had in a room?
I actually don't remember.
Because I've had up to 12 people in a single room. And literally everyone was only eating ramen.
The Keeping Friendship Magic podcast does not endorse the opinions expressed of the individuals.
Oh, they're not opinions. They are fact. They're what I've done.
Although that's, and we'll just call a spade. That does happen.
Yeah,
it does. It does.
The bigger cons, it's more likely to happen, like Otakon and Katsucon, MagFest.
I mean, it is a struggle. I don't want to. I definitely, even this past BronyCon, it was a struggle for us to pay for the room. Just how expensive it is to get a hotel room right there and in a harbor right next to the convention center.
Yep.
And it's one of the things I appreciate about some of the smaller conventions where it's not quite as much and it's a little easy to split with 2 or 3 friends. So, but that's definitely something to always be considered within it. One thing I think that's interesting is and this is a broader topic of conversation as well, is the difference between in-person interaction and online interaction. And cosplay is definitely one of those areas. Is I've seen some very negative things spouted out on people online, on cosplayers, and where I think we all can do better, and that's just the fact of life. But it's almost that sense of it's easier online to be negative, to throw hate speech around, because there isn't as much fear of that direct repercussion. So, as cosplayers, where do you stand on that? How comfortable do you feel sharing everything in your open space online compared to doing it in person?
I mean, when I first started doing it, like at BronyCon, I wore a bunny suit. I mean, when I was first putting it on, I was in the hotel room. I was like, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can do this. And then I started walking in the hall, and I was like, oh, this is fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of if you really want to do it versus if you think you want to do it.
Okay. Some people would argue that if you are posting yourself online, you're opening yourself up to ridicule, to comments, etc.
Yep.
And there's certainly, it's certainly a reality, but how do each of you internally manage that sense of the knowledge that some people are just trolling or just saying something just to say it?
I mean, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I have a very don't philosophy. Like, if I'm going to go post anything about my cosplays, it's either going to be like on my personal Facebook where only my friends can see it, or like through Messenger where once again only really friends can see it.
Close friends.
Yeah. that I trust. But other than that, it's just like I
So,
don't.
to that extent, how does that make you feel inside that you feel like you can't share it more openly? Is that a downer to you, or are you comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable with it, I think. Like, I don't plan on being like the next like Mig Turney or anything that
Right.
makes a living off this stuff, so it's just like
Mm-hmm.
I'm just doing it for fun.
See, for me, I grew up on the internet, and by that I mean I was on the internet back in the days of Usenet and, having a 14.4 modem and literally just BBS systems.
How many of us had a GeoCity site?
So I had it all.
Yep.
But this is even before that. So I literally grew up with all the stuff, forums, chat rooms, you name it. So I kind of got to the point where it's like, whatever. It's like I don't even bother looking at the comments, really.
Mm-hmm.
There's no point. And even if they're negative, I mean, a lot of them are making the negative comments trying to get you riled up.
Mm-hmm.
See, one thing that was really complicated for me is just like, like I do art, so it's just like I had this love-hate relationship with the comments section because like sometimes they could actually give helpful feedback.
Yeah, proper criticism.
But then it's just like, but then you might come across that troll comment, and it's just like, you want to go say that it doesn't get to you, but you're lying.
I mean, like in my case, I have developed a thick skin to that stuff that a lot of that stuff really doesn't faze me anymore.
I've had a lot of internal debate over the years, and I'll probably get deeper into this in a different episode or something, but about how much I open myself up with the work that I do. And when I started this project, the Keeping Friendship Magic project, it was very much, this is not about me, this is about the project, and I am just the one delivering the message, and I tried to keep myself out of it as much as possible. And over time, it kind of became a thing where people started knowing me and recognizing me from, the convention scene or other work I've done, and then it became a matter of, okay, well, there's a matter of kind of using myself to get the message out there. And I've kind of come to this determination at this point that whatever I can do to get some positivity out there is what's important at the end of the day, to get the message of togetherness and of combining science and fandom and pop culture to make a better tomorrow. Because the bottom line is, even if I only help a couple of people out, I'm still helping. And I'm willing to take on the naysayers, pardon the pun. But, because I know I'm going to get it. I know there are going to be people who think that I'm full of it, or that are going to say, that just aren't going to listen. And that just is reality of the world. And at the end of the day, everybody's going to have to make that choice of what it means to them. But I recognize that sometimes people will have the difference in the internet is back in the day, like back 20 some years ago, you basically had your friends in person. And you could look at a piece of art, you could look at this and turn to your friend and be like, man, that is crap, or, oh, I don't get it. And it's whatever. But nowadays, you can just share that opinion right on it, and it goes directly back to the creator.
Exactly.
So we're still treating everything like it was just in our group of friends when it's bigger now. The scope has changed, and we have not adapted to it. So now there's a matter of course we have to adapt, but everybody's going to have to adapt in certain ways. And, I take everything with a grain of salt, personally.
Exactly, you have to. And
not everybody is able to do it as well. And I'm not saying that I'm a god or, I should be revered or some, this is the way to be. But you have to find your own peace with it and do what makes you feel good. And you know what? Some people will need to privatize everything and block it because that is what works for them, and that's okay. and they need to not be judged for it, because you have to find your own inner peace. And I think that's at the core of this, because, you know, to bring everything full circle, why do we cosplay? And I think all of us said that we find it fun and empowering.
Yeah, we do it for personal enjoyment, mostly.
So at the end of the day, if you follow through with that, doing it for personal enjoyment, you adjust to what keeps that at the core of what you are.
Yep.
So I think we're about coming up on time here. But I do want to thank each of you for joining me today for this discussion. I want to thank you, the viewer, for tuning in. If you do have any questions you'd like to hear answered on the show, you may leave a comment on them, or you may email us, keepingfriendshipmagic@gmail.com. Miss Lyrical Lace over here, do you have anything you want to discuss about what you've got going on before we depart for the day?
Like, the only other thing I really got going on in my life besides cosplay is I actually play roller derby with the Harrisburg area roller derby team. We currently have our first bout of the year, our season opener against the Schuylkill County Scream Queens, sorry, my bad. And that's on Sunday, March 8th. Starts at 6 o'clock, doors open at 5:30. If you want to see a bunch of women play a really good full contact sport, it's definitely worth checking out. And if you go to that and you like what you see, you're welcome to come to our recruitment night, which is on April 27th.
Fantastic. I know I can say this, that having known you for years, getting to hear all of everything that you've described of being a part of Derby, it does seem like cosplay a very empowering experience.
Actually, I find it more empowering because my cosplay group and the brony groups I've been part of have always been there for you and really close, tight knit. Derby is on a far more extreme level. Yeah, you're beating each other up, but we love each other, and there's just a level of camaraderie I've not seen anywhere else with roller derby.
It's fantastic. Definitely looking forward to seeing your matches this year. Definitely.
You.
If you're in the Pennsylvania area, definitely come out and take a look.
Harrisburg area specifically.
I know there's not too much new to announce at the moment for Nova Rose and I that we haven't discussed in the previous episodes, but we have a couple of conventions booked for the year.
ZenkaiCon and TrockCon.
ZenkaiCon and TrockCon are definites for us. You can definitely see us there. We'll be presenting multiple panels at both conventions. We might even get to team up with Miss Lyrical Lace at TrockCon for one or two. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge.
Oh, yeah.
So anyway, come to TrockCon. And
hashtag come to TrockCon.
There we go.
But with that being said, I thank you all for listening. I thank you all for your time. And remember, everyone out there, to keep friendship magic. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.